Justice Through Music was at the Marvin Center at the George Washington University for a night of solidarity with imprisoned journalists in Iran, and several journalists and scholars were on hand to speak about the problem facing journalists in Iran, especially after the 2009 elections, widely believed to be rigged.
Good evening, everyone. بفرمایید. بفرمایید خواهش میکنم. بفرمایید. شب همگی خوش. I'm Rudy Bakhtiar. I work for the International Campaign for Human Rights in Iran. Welcome to an evening of solidarity with journalists who are imprisoned inside of Iran. Unfortunately for us, Iran now holds the uncoveted title of #1 country when it comes to journalists in prison, surpassing China. Now, 1/3 of the world's journalists that are in prison are inside of every prison inside of Tehran. The reason why they're in prison? Because they've been trying to shed a light on the gross human rights violations going on inside of Iran. Unfortunately, Iran is guilty of many human rights violations. Iran remains the #2 country behind China when it comes to number of people executed. That number quadrupled under Ahmadinejad's presidency. Iran is one of the few countries that still executes juvenile offenders. Juvenile offenders are children who have committed a crime. As young as the age of 9, girls are accountable inside of Iran. As young as the age of 15, boys are accountable. And if they've committed some violence like murder when they come of age, some are executed. Iran is one of the few countries that does that. Iran, unfortunately, still does not give equal rights to women, nor does it treat its minorities fairly. And Iran is, unfortunately, now, the world knows that Iran is capable of terrible violence, which kills a young 26-year-old who goes to peacefully march for her voting rights. A beautiful girl named Neda, who at the age of 26 loses her life completely unjustly inside of Iran. And other violations, such as an attack on a university dormitory at the dead of night at 1 a.m. on Tehran University at June 15th, where students as young as 18 and 19 and 20 and 21 were terrorized and dragged from their dormitories in the dead of night and toppled on top of each other and beaten, one of them to death, several of them landing inside of hospitals. These are the atrocities that these journalists who are now in prison were trying to expose. And I thank you for showing up tonight and showing solidarity with them, because it matters. It matters that we care, and later we'll talk about what we can do by caring. We have an extraordinary panel tonight. Extraordinary people have shown up to speak about their experiences, whether they're journalists or human rights activists. So let's get to them. But before we do, we have a short clip of a friend of mine, Yasmin Athianadi, who I became friends with after he was released. He himself was arrested post-elections in Iran as a journalist and was held captive for about a month and was tortured. And let's hear him, in his own words, tell his experience.
It was just basically the most recent reporting trip. We weren't expecting a big event to happen out of the elections. The 2005 elections have been pretty much as routine as you could expect, and so we're expecting another round of the same. Little did we know. They'd given 500 visas to foreign journalists, and they wanted them to come and give coverage to this splendid occasion of Islamic democracy in action. And then when things didn't go the way they planned, they became very embarrassed and they started trying to gather up these foreign journalists. So I was in prison for 20 days altogether, 19 of them in prison. And they held me in solitary confinement throughout that time without the possibility of going out for exercise or socializing myself in any way, except through the interrogators, whom I saw on a nearly daily basis, but there were also gaps of 3 or 4 days when I wouldn't see them. And that was actually in some ways much tougher than the actual interrogations themselves, because you're completely on your own. No reading matter, no pen or paper. The only reading matter that I had, which I read a lot, was the Quran. Constant light, this sort of, white torture, as they call it. The idea that the light is always on, so, it's very difficult to sleep, except if you put your blindfold on, and even so, the charge was very clear from the beginning. It was espionage. The Iranians do tend to accuse every foreigner that they catch of being a foreign agent. I was released and then I was rearrested. So I was released from Lebanon prison and I was taken to the airport. Greek ambassador met me, gave me my ticket to Dubai. I went through passport control and I was promptly rearrested and taken back to the same part of the airport where I'd been before, and then thrown in an overnight cell. And then the next day there was this whole attempt to pressure me into writing a confession that I threatened national security, and in the end I didn't, because I said I refuse to do this. Take me back to prison. I've already proven to one set of interrogators that I'm innocent. I'm not about to go and sign a confession now. Thankfully they didn't do that and I went home. I became aware that there was this big campaign in terms of information management, and that the Committee to Protect Journalists had been very heavily involved through Frank Smythe, who was an amazing source of support to my family, and also to my partner, with whom they would speak at all times of day and night. On top of that, you had my editors at Global Post and at the Washington Times and at the Pulitzer Center for Crisis Reporting, who were in daily contact with my family and with the CPJ. It was very comforting to know, even after the event, that there was a team of people that were basically just raring to go. Really, quite frankly, when you're sitting in a solitary confinement cell, it's nice to know that you're not completely alone.
Yason was released and he was recently reporting out of Afghanistan. I don't know those of you who follow what he does. Recently he's been going through Afghanistan. He's based out of Turkey and just headed over to Greece and was comparing Athens to Kabul, because as you know there's a lot of violence going on in Athens as well. We're happy that he is okay, and we wish his outcome for all of the other imprisoned journalists inside of Iran.